Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Busy to Rich podcast, where we help financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage, increase profitability, and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice. With me, as always, Wes Young. Wes, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Justin, doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited about today's topic. We had a chance offline beforehand to touch base, obviously, and do prep for all of these things. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it to you, let you introduce it, just especially based off of the unique way this topic kind of came about with the conversation with your son, for a little context.
Yeah. So I was texting with my son Gage. So shout out Gage if you're listening. Actually, this morning, he's studying abroad in Europe, and he's a junior at TCU, and he's going to be interning this summer in New York. So he's kind of on that last stages of his college career, moving into what he'll begin to do his first part of his working life. And so he asked a lot of great questions. And one of the things this morning he had shot me, he said, "Question: how did you work or get things done before smartphones and high-speed wireless internet? How was it different?"
That's such a younger person question.
Yeah, and I think it's great. And what it did get me thinking, it put me back in the place of what was life like. Like, I graduated from high school in 1996, and I'm 47 now, and I got to trying to remember what was work like. I was an electrician's assistant to start with, and I became an electrician. Then I moved more to the account management until around 2003, where I moved into the financial services business. And I got me thinking, because one of the things we talk about all the time on this podcast is how our greatest opportunities to recognize our future possibilities is not about abandoning our normal. It's also not about rejecting new. It's about keeping tension between the two. That if you don't have an ethic for constantly trying to normalize new ideas, new technologies, really paying attention to where the trends are going, then you're at some point going to be beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists. Because I remember as an early days apprentice, let me just give you some context there. So your job was, you went with an electrician and you went to whether a house or a commercial building, whatever, for service or for new construction. And your job was to kind of do as much as you could to free up that guy to do the things that were higher and best use. And gradually you get better at it, and you kind of operate almost as an electrician before you pass the test and you become a licensed electrician, and you're, going and doing the work. And then eventually I evolved into more of the account management, where you're going out and bidding jobs and getting contracts and winning contracts and creating relationships with people that were in positions to regularly give you contracts. And so the kind of that development. But I was just thinking about the technology we used. Like, as an apprentice electrician, I remember we had Nextel radios. Justin, did you ever have a Nextel radio?
I didn't have one, but I remember them.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere you go, you hear this, and it would like beep, because you had everybody in your Nextel radio. That also could be a phone if you paid for the bigger service. But everybody in the construction community was like connected by these Nextel radios. So as long as you had their Nextel, you could punch the one or the little key code, and you press the button, and it would just, almost like if you got a text, it vibrates. It would vibrate and make a little noise. And then, but the only interesting thing about the Nextel is then you could either hit them back, or they could press the button if they had yours and just talk. And it was on speaker all the time. So like, we would mess with each other even with these things. I like, if you were at a bank, I remember one of my buddies was at a bank. I go to deposit my check. I'm standing in line at the bank right now. I'll hit you back later. And so once I knew he was in line, I said, "He's got a gun. He's got a gun. He's got a," he's like, "Oh my God." So you could silence it, and turn it off. But we had a lot of fun with him. But that was how we would communicate intercompany, communicate with your friends and stuff like that. And then we had pagers. You remember, and pagers were kind of phasing out by the time I got there. But in like middle school and high school, I remember pagers were a big deal. If you had a pager, it's so cool.
Oh yeah.
Because, man, you could get that number that was texted to, or pagered to you. It'd vibrate or ring, and then you had to go find a phone, and you had to call the number back that was on the pager. Payphones were still around back then, and
yeah.
Landline.
That's also where you were like tried to get creative and cheap with what you were sending on the page, right? Like to where what you're sending, like 911, right? Like
Yeah.
for you need to come home or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Shorthand that we use now in text to take for granted, like that's
That's
where it
right.
started.
That's right. You could spell words, some of them bad words with numbers that you do for funny things to get when you're immature and young and or immature and old, either way. Um, and so you had those. Now, then cell phones started being more of a thing. I remember my dad actually had one my latter years of high school, and he had the old at first the bag phone that fit in the car that would like mount it in the car. You could take it with you, just unsnapped it and put it in the bag and you carry it. But it was this big bag, had to be plugged in. And then I got a really cool and as an electrician, Justin, I had this big hip phone. And this thing was like if you've ever seen war movies where they're like calling in the jets to come bomb things, and it's like a backpack almost looking thing, but they had the giant phone with a big antenna out the top. I wore that sucker on my hip, had a holster for it. I mean, it was great. And then, so you kind of had work going on that way. Blockbuster Video back then was still in its heyday. I mean, it reached its peak, I think, in like 2003. It was like a $6.3 billion company. But man, when I first started working in the electrical trade back in the late 90s, I mean, Blockbuster was a great home entertainment company, all these things going on. I remember fax machines, even once I had migrated into the electrical business, fax machines were predominantly used for our contracts. So if I came out to your house and I bid the job and I said, okay, I'm going to go write this up and then we're going to fax it over to you, or more on the commercial side, we're going to fax in our bid. And fax machines, for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, um, you can look it up, but you basically would put whatever you wanted to be faxed into the fax machine, kind of like a copier, but it would like digitally scan it inside of there. And then whatever phone number through the phone system that you wanted to send it to, it would come out the other side on fax paper in their side of things. And this is when computers weren't quite as prevalently used, and email was like people didn't want. No, don't email anything. I don't really check that. Go ahead and fax it to me. Uh,
Yeah.
so there was all these things, and I remember getting super innovative, and I put a inverter in my truck when I was bidding jobs because I could hook up my printer in there to AC power, and I could go into the place, figure out what it was going to be, do the bid on my computer, and print it right there in my truck before I left the site to get my turnaround time faster. And I'd bring that into them right there. People were like, "How'd you get it so fast?" Um, so the main point here is like these were all the things that were, and then you look at what today is, right? Today we're recording this on technology that we could not have even afforded and wasn't been that good over a Zoom call. We're recording our podcast. Today I will have 8 meetings over Zoom, and I will be able to show my iPad and whiteboard on it in front of a client. Um, I'll communicate with my family and friends via text message, which we'll talk about more in a second. I will, anywhere I'm at on the planet through my Starlink, my mini Starlink. That if those of you who are watching, you can see this thing. It's it is this big. This tiny little, almost like a size of, in fact, it's about a little bit bigger than my iPad, and I can get internet capable of doing a Zoom call almost anywhere on the planet that I'm capable of going. And there is no breakdown. We'll be able to, we're going on a hunt this weekend, and we'll be able in the middle of nowhere with no data connection to be able to get internet and watch the UFC fight on Saturday night. So like you have all these technology, then you bring in AI, and the game changer that is, I can be in a meeting with a client and use Zox, and it's going to be my note-taking assistant. It will spit out some of the best, highest quality notes and categorize it in the way that I like to see it. And I don't need a person in there to do it. I can use all these great things today. So one thing I'd like to talk about first, Justin, and I'm sure you've got a litany of things on there, is just this idea that whenever we are in a world of change, and guess what? You're always in a world of change, that unless you have an ethic in there to actually focus on regularly blending in new into your normal. And it doesn't mean you have to be the innovator on it. It doesn't mean you have to be the creator of it, but you should have time allocated to pay attention to what's going on in the fringes. Because that thing, there's a great quote here that says, all truth passes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as being obvious or self-evident. And so I just like to start there with the discussion around this idea in general of how things seem so massively different, but when you're living in whatever your normal is, things 10 years from now, people are going to go, how did you do work without all these things? Well, and so let's just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical point, because if you're an advisor doing business today and your plan is to just keep advising and doing things the way that you're currently doing them, you may find yourself 10 years down the road outdated and without clients. If you look back to how advisors were operating 10 years ago, the ones that stayed doing the way that they were doing it before, a lot of them, because we've spoken with a lot of them lost business or just were forced into a place of having to make a transition that they weren't prepared for or looking for, and they were behind the power curve. And so if you want to be proactive versus reactive, you have to take that mindset. And as this talks about, at first, those new ideas and looking for new opportunities, there's resistance, right? Like we have a call, and you go to one conference and you come back and you've got 72 ideas, and you're like, hey, Justin, you got these ideas, right? There's some resistance at first because it's a lot of new at one time, but that doesn't make it worth stopping, because none of those ideas that you mentioned, like the way that we do things today, all started there. I'll start with somebody being like, no, we can't do that. But somebody had to be like a visionary and then also be willing to move it forward into the place where it's going through, it's being violently opposed to get to a place where it's self-evident. It's become the new way of doing things.
Yeah, I was listening to our friend Sten Morgan's podcast this morning, and what it was all about is like identifying industry trends and things. And one of the statements he made I thought was pretty cool. He said that, most of the time when a trend becomes apparent, it's probably about 5 to 10 years old already. Mm-hmm. And unless you're an innovator and like really wired for focusing on new, when it comes to the mainstream, when people begin to start normalizing it, it's a little older already than you think. I remember this as it relates to remote meetings, because about 12 years ago, we became a completely remote office, and we used GoToMeeting at the time because that was the better technology. Zoom didn't exist at first, and Zoom has since massively outpaced, in my opinion, the functionality of GoToMeeting. And don't even get me started on Teams. If you're a Teams person, I think you just need to normalize some new and get some Zoom life. But either way, it was like, well, when I think of the future of a great advisor, particularly with as good as technology is utilizing remote meetings to make more and faster progress with clients. And keep in mind, it didn't really exist in our industry before. So I'd go talk about it with what we were doing, and it was working. And I would eat the same thing every time, Justin. People would say, I could never do that. And for my market, it wouldn't. But what they were really saying is, I've never done that, and I can't imagine doing it differently than how I've always done it. And so they first ridiculed it. That's not going to work. Then when it was working for me, violently opposed it in their particular industry. Now everybody accepts it as obvious. It's just like, well, of course you can do that, and certainly
COVID helps.
COVID helps. Yeah. COVID helped our adoption rate for sure. But
I was going to say, it's also kind of like, since a lot of our listeners are advisors, I just think about when you're looking at a stock or a fund, a mutual fund, like if it's up 40%, right? Like you didn't catch that trend early.
Yeah.
Like you're behind the power curve on that one. And while it was positive to this point, now your opportunity to come and reap new benefit, while still may be there, it's going to be dramatically limited because you were behind on that first that first whole 40% gain to that point.
Yeah. I will tell you, the most successful companies, people, um, teams in the world are those that have a ethic or a value of normalizing new things into the rhythm of their operation all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that they're like constantly blowing up the what's got them where they are, but there is this area of exploration, I would call it. And it doesn't mean everybody on the team needs to be wired this way, but like, as you know, I'm very much new focused. Like, I'm also very much about, so every time on our quarterly planning, one of the things I'll have on there is I'll have nurture the normal. And under nurture the normal, I'll have what do we need to do, keep doing that we've been doing. And that might be like for right now, we do our keep on our mid-year to year-end schedule with clients that have already been onboarded. For onboarding new clients, follow the location expectation process and direction process. New, and then I'll have challenge the normal with new. So what are we not doing that we want to normalize? Well, this quarter, one of the things was Zox was something we added into the rhythm of our organization that wasn't there before because we didn't really know about it. Utilizing AI to as our default, not to instead of just asking, hey, how would you word this email? One of the things on our team we've been real about is, hey, yeah, go put that into Claude, tell them a situation, see what it comes back with, ask it to say it in a nicer way. Instead of you relying on me, why don't you start using Claude? And again, change for people who are in a groove and are very, let's say, let's get it done focused. A lot of times dancing with new is very unnatural for them. So you have to create like specific attention moments around that.
Yeah, I think no matter what industry you're in, you'll find they have some version of like an R&D team, right? Or an R&D department. You've got your research and development. And if you're a solo advisor, well, then that's you. But to your point, you have to create space for that. Like there's things that I'm doing that have gotten me here and keeping the lights on, but how do I continue to position myself to be in a better place and on the front end of the industry versus, halfway through finding out like, oh, I probably should have adopted that sooner.
Yeah. I'll tell you an industry trend. I took this out of the SENS Elite Advisor Network podcast. There's a crazy amount of advisors that are 57 years old or older right now. So you have like the big majority of the advisor population is going to be by mortality or choice aging out over the next several years. So there are enormous opportunities there, both in ways to, help them transition successfully, but also to take advantage of what is going to happen naturally anyway. And are you looking for that? How are you going to normalize that new landscape as it comes in? So it's a great podcast. I recommend everybody go give it a listen as well. But yeah, Justin, just your thoughts on that.
No, it's just a good point. And just continue to reiterate it of like, there are some stuff in this industry that we need to be paying attention to. And I think before this podcast ends, what people are going to be asking, and I know what I want to get to at some point is what do you recommend? What are you seeing trend-wise, the things that we're looking at and considerations and how to integrate? And then the stuff that you're finding from other podcasts like Stens that you mentioned about the industry, any other insights that you would have of what advisors should be looking for to stay ahead of the times?
Yeah. So I would definitely say you need to embrace technology tools. And I'm gonna give you specific examples of what I mean by that. If you don't have an AI assistant inside of all of your meetings, and again, they can be remote meetings like we typically do, or it could be on location meetings. Because like as an example, Zox, which is our note-taking assistant, it can join your Zoom meeting. You can also press a button on your phone. You can tie it into a phone call. So if I'm with somebody, I can press a button on my phone, and it's like having an assistant in there to capture all these details that I would not have been able to capture and still carried on a good conversation with the client. It makes the whole process for our team when they go to prepare an initial analysis so much better, so much easier, so much more clarity. And if they're that single advisor that's out there, you just started or you don't have a team yet, man, the games you think about it, this new team member, his name will be Zoc. is like an amazing addition to your organization. Utilizing AI like ChatGPT, Claude AI. I love this in so many different ways, Justin. So, for instance, when I'm thinking up things for the podcast, and I'll speak it into Claude. I'll say, Claude, I do a weekly podcast on holistic fee-based financial planning, and I talk about our philosophies. I'll speak all our philosophies in the Claude. So I'm just talking with a microphone on. I'm not even typing. Um, and I'll speak all that stuff in. And I'll say, now I'm really looking to understand what would be some key struggles or key opportunities that are often overlooked by the advisor community. And it'll give me these nice little outputs, and I can go, oh yeah, can we expand on that? So I'll say, what do you think about this? And I'll think, and it'll like expand back. Same thing with tax questions. Type it into Claude, speak it into Claude. When you're getting documents that need to be reviewed, you just you annotate out the last names on those documents so that you're not putting non-public information into those systems, but load it, attachment into Claude, say, hey, Claude, be my paraplanner, be my project manager, my paralegal, and summarize this for me. They're going to be able to do it in a very quick way. I have a very good client of ours that has identity or a data breach that this morning he let me know. And we've experienced that with clients. I mean, it was his CPA had a data breach. So he let him know, hey, listen, your data may be compromised just because we had this deal. And he's like, what precautions do I need to take? Well, we've dealt with it enough to where I could have typed up an email about it and saying, here are the common things. What I did is I just spoke that into Claude and said, hey, when this happens, what are some of the common things that should be done? What did it do? Spit back this nice organized list of all the precautions to take and sites to go to, how to freeze your credit with the major credit institutions or rating, check institutions. And so certainly those types of things are on the cutting edge. Here's one that this has been around a while because but it's still so underutilized. Doing holistic fee-based financial planning, which is what we teach in our class. Because you get people that came up through the wirehouse mentality, the money management only mentality, and the biggest difference is I think they do planning a lot of times, and they may mention some things. They may go, yeah, I mean, I get paid to manage the money, but I'll bring up ideas, and if they ask me questions, I'll help them with that. Or they come up through the protection side, where they're saying, hey, let's make sure your protection needs are met. And we sell insurance and we get commission for that, or annuity, or a combination of the two. But when you follow a holistic fee-based financial planning process where you're getting paid for your advice, for your ideas, it is a different ball game with the clients. And the best advisors that are getting massive market share right now that we get to observe, that's the game they're playing. So thoughts on that stuff, Justin?
I think you just summarized the point of sometimes it's not completely new from a technology or a business vertical, if you will. It's about finding new ways of utilizing it. Yeah. Even on the Chat GPT or Claude on the AI spectrum, a lot of people just use it as a glorified Google search. It's just something else that they're typing in and searching. Sure. Versus the way that one of the guys that I'm in strategic coach with, a good friend, Jeff Woods, wrote the book, The AI Driven Leader, and he talks about like AI can be a strategic thought partner. Most people aren't aware that you can actually prompt it to interview you give it details, and then it curate a bunch of different ideas that you were probably never considering, or maybe you would get there, but in a fraction of a second, it was able to get you there versus the amount of time it would take you to go research to arrive at that place. So instead of just a quick thing that you have to trust the information where it's searching across TikTok and everything else that's on the internet, right? Like you're leading it along a pathway and using the system and how it's designed to get you to a new level and a new place of operating so much faster. Same thing with holistic planning. It's just a new way or a different way for some people doing a similar concept that just promotes a much better quality and higher output within a fraction of the time or capability.
Yeah. No, I love it. And this is certainly not it's one of those things that, again, my best recommendation is if you find yourself regularly pushing back against things that are different from what you're doing, then you're going to find yourself in a position where one day you're beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists. Keeping yourself where you have a time to, and we always call it, there's like these big 4 things when it comes to challenging your normal with new. You need ideation. And ideation is this: what is feeding you new ideas that are not a part of your normal? So is that a class you're in? Like for you and I, we go to Strategic Coach. We are part of the Transform community. We have people that come to that. That can be part of your new podcast you're listening to. What is challenging your normal with new? And sometimes you might look at that and go, nothing. And if it's nothing, then you're in danger here. You're in danger of becoming extinct from reaching your peak potential. So there's the ideation phase. Then there's resolution. And so resolution is, do you have regular scheduled intervals in your year where you're deciding what of our normal are we going to nurture and what new are we going to normalize? Okay, so our normal, what are we going to keep doing because it's been working and we think it's a good base for what we want to keep doing, don't want to change it right now. And what new things are we going to blend into the rhythm of our organization that are not a part of our normal? So for us, that means, resolution is simply a choice to do or not to do something, a decision to do or not to do something. And what we do regularly, again, we coincide our quarterly planning with our strategic coach, where we go get out of the business for a while. And, you got usually around 3 days because you got to get there. And then you go to the strategic coach day, where it's a lot of thinking and exercises where you're kind of narrowing the focus of what it is you're going to focus on. And then you got your trip back. Well, it's a great point in time to just stop and say, all right, what were my results? What do I want to celebrate? What of my normal do I want to nurture? And what new is going to really move the needle of all the new I could do that I want to blend in and make muscle memory as a part of my life? Then the third box, is this execution. Orchestration. Orchestration is like, if you imagine a conductor, it all sounds like noise until an orchestra comes together and it sounds beautiful when somebody gets up and gets them in the same rhythm on the same page. How are you going to orchestrate this new into your already overcrowded normal? Like, how are you going to put it on the calendar? How are you going to implement this new idea? Because every one of us has left a conference, has read a book, listened to a podcast, and said, these are great ideas. These are taking a class. These are needle. This is going to really 10x our growth. And then 3 months, 6 months, a year later, you come back and it didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Because you never orchestrated it into your calendar and say, here's how we're going to make this a part of our muscle memory. The last thing is just, I'd call it execution, is really looking and saying, did we execute upon the thing that we did, or did we move that thing in our calendar? Because new is always the easiest to move because it's not adding your bottom line right now. It never has historically. It actually sometimes feels like you're cheating on real work. And so, but you got to have weekly touch points to say, how's my execution plan going? So ideation, resolution, orchestration, execution is the best way I know to build this muscle, because it is a muscle and you will get better at it. And the better you get at it, the better your organization is going to increase profitability and quality of life.
Love it. Anything else before we wrap for today?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. Really appreciate all of you who have been with us since the beginning, and then those of you continuing to jump in and start digesting a lot of this material. We highly encourage you to go to the website. There's a bunch of additional material you guys can go back and listen to old podcasts, or if you like viewing, you can actually find us on YouTube as well. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.